Hello and welcome back. In the last video, we talked about functional requirements. And like I said, requirements that we spell out as developers before we start building an application, they are grouped into functional and non-functional. And as a recap, functional requirements describes what a system should do, the features that the system should have. And for what we describe for the application we are going to build, we are going to have functional requirements like user authentication, user profile, messaging, payment gateway, and some other functional requirements. Now, quickly, let's talk about non-functional requirements. Now, if you remember, functional requirements are requirements that usually involves actions that a user will perform when using an application. Now, for non-functional requirements, you can think of non-functional requirements as requirements that involves the look and feel, how a user feels when using an application. Okay? Is the application slow? Or how fast is the application? Or what is the loading time of this application that I'm using? How does the UI look? So those are examples of non-functional requirements. So they usually involves how a user feels about an application, while functional requirement involves the functions that the user will perform when using an application. Okay, so non-functional requirements describes how the system should perform rather than what it should do. So functional describes what, non-functional describes how. Okay, so how the system should perform. Okay, how fast should the system be? How available should the system be? How reliable should the system be? Okay, so those are non-functional requirements. So non-functional requirement describes how the system works, like I've already said. Now, they focus on the quality attributes and constraints that a system must meet. Okay, so if you are building an application that you know will have millions of users, then you will want to take into considerations non-functional requirements like scalability, reliability, maintainability. Okay, because those are what affects how a user feels about an application. It is said that users, after about maybe 5 seconds, a user would decide whether or not to continue using your application. So if you have your application that loads, that takes 20 seconds to load, there's a particular application that I use. I won't say the name, but it's a very popular application. But I don't know why. It's a sports application, a sports website. I don't know why the developers, they are not looking at it. If you want to, there are some parts you want to check, it will take time before it loads. And sometimes I just get fed up. Okay. Now for some users, they would not return to such website or such application because it takes time to load. Okay. Now non-functional requirements are equally important as functional requirements because they impact the user's experience with the system. Okay. So they usually involves how the user feels, the experiences user have with the system. Now in this case, system could be software, mobile applications, web applications, Google applications, whatever. Okay, so these are examples of non-functional requirements. Now for our own application that we want to build, what are the non-functional requirements that we are going to take into consideration? The first is scalability. Now for our application building, we are going to start building the application locally. That is fine. We don't need to care about scalability. We don't need to care about other non-functional requirements like security because we are building locally. But once we want to deploy to the cloud, that is when we start taking into consideration when we have an application that we think users can start using, then we can take into consideration scalability. So the system should be able to scale to accommodate increased load during peak times. Okay. So for some applications, there are periods that you have peak times. Okay. So your application should be able to handle those peak periods. So they should be able to scale out. You add more resources or you scale in, you reduce resources. Another is availability. Now the system should be available 99.99% of the time. Okay. So this also involves how you deploy your application. For us, we are going to deploy to the cloud. We are going to use AWS, and AWS promises availability of different nines, yeah, okay, but at least we should have a system that is available 99.99% of the time. And also you should be able to have a failover mechanism, okay, in case your system fails, okay. Probably in that case we would need to maybe deploy our application to different availability zones. If one availability zone is down, then the other availability zone will continue running. Our system should be reliable. That means it should be dependable. Okay. So whether should be able to handle loads, it should be able to handle multiple requests. It should be dependable. If it fails, there should be some other mechanisms that will spin up a new system. So our system should be reliable. It should be maintainable. Okay. So we talk about maintainability. Code should follow coding standards and be well documented. Okay. So the maintainability part involves the codes itself that is written by the developers, and regular code reviews and automated testing should be performed. And then we have usability. So users should find the system easy to use. This is very important because the users, they don't really see the parts of availability or scalability, reliability, maintainability. It's not their concern. What their concern is, the system should be easy for them to use. It should have very small loading time. It should not take forever to load. The look and feel of the application is also very important to users. Okay, so these are some of the non-functional requirements we are going to take into consideration. For the first the first three, we are going to take a look at that when we start deploying our application to the cloud. And then maintainability, we try to write follow coding standards. And then for the usability, yeah, we will try our best possible to make the look and feel of the application something attractive for users. Okay.